Hey guys.
Happy Sunday. So, as usual, I feel like this is one of those weeks where you plan what you're going to do and then you end up doing something totally different. And that really started for us with Monday. Now, Monday, just to give you an idea of the weather here, we had 26-mile-an-hour winds, torrential rain. It was the kind of day that you just wanted to be hunkered down inside doing something cozy. So that, of course, means that that's the day the electric company decided to show up to finish connecting us to the new underground electric. So I sat down at the table to prepare for my recipe development day and looked up to see somebody in the courtyard in the bright orange high-vis gear, and behind him coming through our gate was a bucket truck. Now, I just cannot even imagine trying to do anything outside on a day like that.
Yeah, it was super windy.
Let alone high off the ground work. So anyway, the good news is we did get connected to the new underground grid. The bad news is we're still not done with the electric project.
Yep.
So we have counted, and they have now been here 9 times doing different pieces of this project, because this is, understandably, this is a big project with a lot of working parts. So we have already been notified that there will be a day early December where they're going to be taking us off grid for at least a few hours. I think probably to go take poles down that are no longer going to be in service at that point. So anyway, we're getting really close to the end. We'll show you how that project turned out. We did have a bit more storm damage again this time. We'll show you that. Guys, I think at some point there's not going to be any trees left. Anyway, but this week I thought we would also show you some recent thrift store finds. I feel like mostly we've been focused on showing you furniture and stuff, and we'll show you something a little different this time. And then because grocery prices are so high, I thought it would be nice to do a segment on uses for different kitchen scraps, things that you might be in the habit of throwing away or composting that might actually be usable for a few other kitchen projects. So we'll do that. And then I'm happy to say that I'm going to be doing alphabet soup this week with you guys. Now, this is a recipe that I developed about 2.5 years ago. It was right before we decided we're going to move to France. And so I kind of set the recipe aside and had never gotten around to sharing it. So really happy to not be just carrying around this piece of paper anymore that I'm afraid I'm going to lose and to be able to share it with you guys. So you ready to get to it and show them what we've been up to?
Let's do it.
All right. All right, so as we mentioned in the intro, this week was when we finally transitioned to underground power. Now, we were pretty concerned about this last leg of the project because we knew they were going to be stretching the power lines all the way across the front facade of the house, and we were afraid it was going to be pretty ugly. And that would really be a shame because it's a beautiful house. So happily, the 2 guys that came were very into doing a good job. They spent the entire day here working on it, despite the fact that it was just like torrential rain all day. And we were really excited to see how much effort they put into tucking everything away so that it would be as hidden as possible. So the power lines, if you can see, are tucked way, way underneath the gutters. So unless you get really close in, you can't even see them at all, which is amazing. So they stretched them that way across the whole front of the house. Now, we knew that they were going to have to connect down to our power box, our meter. We knew we were going to have a wire running down the front wall. And definitely nothing ideal about that scenario, but you can see they actually tucked it in a conduit that's the same color as the stone. So I think it's about as invisible as we could have hoped for. So definitely a big relief to have this project done and to see that they put so much care into maintaining the look of the house. I thought that it would be fun to show you some of my recent secondhand clothing finds. Now, I feel like we frequently show you secondhand furniture and decor for the house, but we really haven't gotten into how we apply the same strategy to our wardrobes. So something that I have been on the lookout for now for at least a year is a new winter coat. My current one has been in tatters and I was kind of making do while I found a new one. I finally landed on 2 new coats. So this one I found back in August at a vide grenier, and I think it's probably brand new. I paid €4 for it, and I was really excited to get this coat because the entire thing is faux fur lined, so it's a very heavy coat. It'll be great for this winter. And then here recently, within the last week or two, I came across this coat when we were at a thrift store, and I paid €5 for this one. And again, I kind of think it might be brand new. Now, this is a lighter weight coat, so it'll be great for like the shoulder seasons, sort of the fall and transitioning back into the spring. So between these 2 coats, €9, I now have winter coats on lock. I'm good on coats again. Something else recently that I got for a great deal, also secondhand, was a new watch. So I'm really specific about my watch. I've worn this same style watch for I don't even know how many years, decades. And whenever it breaks, I replace it with another one. So this is my watch that I'm talking about. Now, the strap had broken on mine, and I needed to replace it. And when I looked on Amazon, the same watch was €14, which I thought was great. I went back a couple days later to buy it, and it had suddenly shot up to €25 for the watch. Now, on principle, I just couldn't bring myself to spend so much more for the same watch that was $14 the other day. I watched and waited, and there ended up being one in Amazon warehouse, so it was a return. So I paid €11 for my watch. And, a return can mean that it's not going to be in great shape, but this one looked like it was brand new. So that was another inexpensive way that I was able to get something that I needed. So we had another tree that was damaged in this week's storms, but there's actually an upside to this one. Let me show you. Okay, so this is the bay laurel tree that I've shown you guys before. And as you can see, it's a beast, huge. I don't know how old it would have to be that tall. But it did lose a big limb this week. And with a tree this size, losing a limb is more like losing something the size of a tree. So you can see how big this is. It is a big, big branch. Now, I'm not upset that it came down because obviously we don't want anything that size hanging above our heads and being a safety issue. So anyway, we're going to have some cleanup to do here. But before we do that, since this is a bay laurel tree, I want to make the most of all of these bay leaves that are on it. So you can see it is absolutely covered in leaves. So obviously I don't need all of these. This is more than I could probably even use in a lifetime. But I'm going to harvest some of the better ones and then dry them so we'll have them to use in our cooking over the next year. Now, since we have oodles and oodles, we can afford to be really picky. So I'm going to try to just get the best leaves. Now, prior to now, I've been just letting these air dry, and that works really well. However, because we're air drying them, they're drying kind of more of a curved shape. If you buy them at the store, they're flat and they fit nicely in a little splash jar. So to make these more compact this time, I'm going to experiment with drying them in my dehydrators. So I have 2 dehydrators, and we'll pick enough to run 2 loads, and that should give us more than what we would need. Because obviously when you have a tree this big, you can just come out anytime you need bay leaves. So we don't need to have too many dried ones. We'll just have them so they're convenient when it's rainy or the weather's yucky and we don't want to come out and harvest. Telling you, this one tree is like an entire business. I think we could stock the whole village off of this one tree. Thing is, I think everybody has them as well, so nobody really needs them here. All right, with grocery prices as high as they are these days, I know that everyone is looking for new ways to stretch their grocery budget. So I thought I would take a moment and show you some of the ways that we use our kitchen scraps to save money both on our grocery bill and around the house. All right, so let's start here. So this is a jar of dried celery leaves. Now, the other week I showed you that I was keeping all of the tops of my celery when I was cutting it up for another recipe. So I simply threw those in the dehydrator, and you can see that I had quite a few off of just one bunch of celery. Now, obviously not the most useful in this state. So what I've been doing is then grinding those up to a finer consistency, and then using this in place of celery flake in recipes. So if you've bought grocery store celery flake, it's a combination of the celery stalks and the leaves. This is just the leaves. But this, believe it or not, has been a really handy ingredient to have, and I'm going to share a recipe next week where these come in handy. So that's just a simple project where we weren't throwing that away. Another similar thing is with my lemon and orange peel. So in the winter, when citrus is in season, I make a point of buying organic because I know that I'm going to be using the entire orange or the entire lemon, so peel included. So this is a jar of powdered orange peel, and then here is one of powdered lemon peel. So you can see it is a fine powder consistency. This is simply the citrus peels that I've zested and then dried in the oven. And once they were fully dry, then just run them in my spice grinder to turn them into a powder. So this is great because I can use this when I'm making like a lemon pound cake or an orange pound cake, those sorts of recipes that call for zest. I never seem to have fresh oranges or lemons in the house when I'm wanting to work on a recipe like that. So now whenever a recipe calls for zest, I can use this instead. So this is 3 times as potent, the flavor, as the regular zest. So if a recipe calls for, let's say, a tablespoon of zest, then I'm going to use a teaspoon of this, so 1/3 less. This is amazing because I'm now finding that I am making recipes that call for orange or lemon so much more often because I don't have to make the extra trip to the store for the ingredient or have the extra expense of buying like a whole bag of lemons or oranges. Okay, so another thing that I do with scraps is make veggie broth. So whenever I'm cutting vegetables, if I have leftover bits like leaves or root ends, like maybe the tops of carrots or that sort of thing, I save all of that in a bag in the freezer. So I will start a freezer bag. This is like a gallon-sized bag. And anytime I have those sorts of scraps that I know would be good in broth, I just throw them in the bag and I keep adding to it over time. So that when I get around to making broth, whether it's veggie broth or turkey broth or chicken broth or whatever, I have all of these veggies ready to go. I haven't had to go out and buy a bunch of stuff for it. And I'm just utilizing something that would normally be, thrown away or composted or whatever. So here are some of the jars of veggie broth that I've made. And I like to just keep them in a freezer jar. And then this is a pint, so that I know it's like a 2-cup measure. And it makes it really easy for when I have recipes to know how many I need to pull out of the freezer. So that's just something that I was able to make using scraps. Okay, so something else that I'll do that isn't going to give me a food product, but it is going to give me something useful. I don't know if you've ever noticed in videos, I always have a bowl here going of eggshells. So I will let that fill up until it's pretty overwhelmed with eggshells and they've had time to dry. And then I will process those down one of 2 ways. So this is a bag where I've literally just kind of crushed them in my hand. And these jagged pieces are ideal to use in the garden because I can put those around young plants and things that I'm trying to protect from the slugs and the snails. These sharp shell pieces will keep them from getting too close to my stuff. So I can just do a little sprinkle, like a ring, around my plants and not have to worry about the young shoots getting damaged. The other thing I will do is I have an old food processor, just an inexpensive one that I use just for this recipe or just for this project. And I will pulse them long enough to turn them into kind of more of a fine consistency, sometimes even down to a powder. And then this is something that I can use to fertilize plants or add as a soil amendment because the shells are very rich in calcium. So that's something that I am getting to use in the garden instead of having to pay for something. And it's ideal because you really wouldn't want to put these eggshells in your compost because you're going to attract rodents, which you aren't going to want to do. So that's just another simple thing with some of my kitchen scraps. Okay, and let me show you one final one. Now, how often do you buy something like buttermilk or heavy cream for a recipe and then find that it gets pushed to the back of the fridge and you never end up using it and you end up having to throw it away? So my trick for that is to freeze the extras. So if I don't have an immediate plan for heavy cream or buttermilk, eggs, several different things along those lines, I will simply pour my remaining amount in either an ice cube tray or in a muffin pan. Now, these are great because if I have something in the ice cube tray, I know that every frozen cube is the equivalent of 2 tablespoons. So when I have a recipe, it's really easy to know, okay, well, how many cubes do I need? Because it said a 1/4 cup. Okay, I need 2 of them. Makes it very easy because they're already pre-portioned and I can pull out just what I need for a recipe and leave the rest frozen. So I'm able to freeze it in small amounts that are more usable. The same is true for the muffin pan. If I freeze something like heavy cream in the muffin pan, then I know that this is going to be the equivalent of a 1/4 cup. So this is like 4 tablespoons, twice the size of an ice cube. So I do this for quite a few things. You can do this for broth. I mean, really a lot of different ingredients that are able to be stored this way. And I even have kind of a whole collection going of trays with different size cubes. So I will do this with, like, if I open up a jar of pimentos for pimento cheese, I can freeze the extras in cubes that I know are going to work for my recipes. You can also use them when you're trying to, you have a lot of herbs, fresh herbs you're working through, you can freeze them in a little bit of oil or water and then have them kind of pre-portioned where they're a small enough amount that you can add it straight to the pan when you're cooking and not even have to worry about thawing them first. So these are just all examples of ways that I like to use my kitchen scraps. And I'll show you here since I didn't show you. So here is a bag of buttermilk that I froze this week. And these are in the muffin pan. So I've just made a note on the bag that each one of these is a 1/4 cup. So it's useful for me. I don't have to remember that every time, but it's also great for my family because this makes it easy for them to use them as well. And then here are some of the ones that I did in an ice cube tray. So you can see on this one, I've noted that 1 cube equals 2 tablespoons. So I can link to a bunch of recipes and how-tos on my website for doing all of these things, including this week I've put together suggestions for uses for buttermilk and heavy cream and eggs and some of these things, which will include instructions for doing this, but it'll also give you a lot of other things that you can be making out of those products so that you're not having anything you're purchasing at the grocery store going to waste. Okay, since we were just talking about utilizing kitchen scraps, I thought we would do something to utilize some of the veggie broth that I've made. So today I'm going to be showing you how to make your own alphabet soup. So making it yourself is a great benefit because it means you can skip all of the sodium and the mystery ingredients and stuff in the store-bought canned version. And it happens to be really easy to make and probably has only ingredients that you already have on hand. So let's look at the ingredients. Okay, so obviously alphabet soup is a vegetable-based soup, so we have quite a few vegetables. We have carrots, potato, and onions. Then I've also included corn. And then if you remember the other week when we had all of those green beans in our €3 box, I've got frozen green beans. So you can use fresh or frozen ingredients in this recipe, and there's really no need to worry about thawing the vegetables first. Okay, so to make the tomato base for the soup, we also have some diced tomatoes and some tomato paste. And then if we flip over here, we have several jars of my homemade veggie broth, and then of course the all-important alphabet pasta. Now you should be able to find this at your grocery store. If not, you can certainly order it somewhere like Amazon. And don't feel like you have to use alphabet letters. You could certainly use any other small pasta, whether that was shells or elbow noodles or whatever you have in your pantry would be fine. And then for spices, we've got some Italian seasoning. This is my homemade Italian seasoning, and I can link to that if you would like to try to make your own. That's a really easy project. Get a little bit of salt, some ground black pepper, and then just a pinch of red pepper flakes. So that is really the secret to this soup, because a pinch of red pepper flakes sort of dials back the acidity of the tomatoes and really just brightens the flavor of the soup. It doesn't really add anything in the way of heat, just kind of like rounds out the flavor. All right, so let's get busy and I'll show you how fast this comes together. Okay, so we're going to start our soup by sauteing the onions and the carrots in just a little bit of oil. So let's get the oven started, or the stove. All right, and we're just going to add a couple tablespoons of oil. And adding the carrots now is sort of a hack that is going to save you a lot of time on this recipe. So since carrots are a little harder and take longer to cook, by starting them when we're sauteing the onions, we're ensuring that they're going to be done when all of the other ingredients are. So this will save you at least 5 minutes on the recipe. Okay, so our onions have cooked long enough to soften and get a little more translucent. Now we're going to add all of the ingredients except for the alphabet noodles. And we're cooking this on medium-high heat, just since I don't think I mentioned that. Okay, so there's all our broth. Our diced tomatoes in there. Tomato paste. corn. Here are green beans. All right, and then we're gonna get our spices. So there's the Italian seasoning, pepper, tiny bit of salt, and there's our pinch of red pepper flake. All right, so we're gonna cook this on medium-high heat until it comes to a boil, which is gonna take about 10 minutes. Okay, so our soup has come to a boil, and now we're gonna add our alphabet letters. And then we're gonna put the lid on, reduce this to a simmer, and then cook it for another 8 minutes. So at this point, all of our veggies are done, and we just need time for the pasta to cook. Now, you do wanna periodically stir this because, as is the case with most pastas, it's gonna try to like sink down to the bottom and stick. So be sure to stir it regularly so all your letters aren't getting stuck. All right, so our alphabet pasta is fully cooked, and now our alphabet soup is ready to serve. All of those tasty, healthy veggies with the added fun of alphabet pasta. Now this makes 8 servings, so you have a family of 4, that means you can have dinner and then leftovers for lunch the next day. If you're cooking for a smaller number of people, you could certainly have the recipe, but this actually freezes really well. So if you want to have some easy, ready meals this fall and winter, you can just pop all the extras in your freezer. So as usual, I will include a link to this recipe in the description below the video.